in this wild up and down roller coaster ride of the news cycle we have been in lately with Nintendo Switch 2 launch information, we have what I would consider to be some great news to go over today. And while it is not a permanent solve or fix for the launch of Nintendo Switch 2 and the long-term pricing of the console, I do believe that this is the green light situation that Nintendo was likely waiting for to kind of see where the puzzle pieces were going to fall into place in terms of the immediate launch date, how things will be impacted when people are placing pre-orders and delivering those pre-orders to customers on June 5th. Because you probably remember that the US and Canada both were set to have pre-orders go live for Switch 2 on April 9th, and those were both delayed due to the tariff situation that is unfolding, stemming here from the US, of course, but having these trade negotiations with countries large and small all across the globe, and it is impacting things like how Nintendo will price their console that we already know should be $450 and $500, but we already know that according to Doug Bowser, the $450 price point that was set without taking into account additional tariffs on top of it. So when the 46% metric was being thrown around out there from a major distributor like Vietnam, that was obviously causing some issues for Nintendo, and they decided to pause the pre-orders for Switch 2 indefinitely. And now we have an official pause on the tariffs themselves for the next 90 days, with a 10% rate being proposed during those 90 days. It's effective immediately. And not only does this mean that Nintendo can move ahead with the scheduled launch of the console and the pre-orders and everything that we want to see confirmation of, but alongside of that news, we have some further great news that suggests that not only does Nintendo have a bunch of consoles here in the US already that we kind of knew about from a shipping report earlier, but now we have confirmation of it. It also sounds like they're going to have the largest launch stock by a long shot in history. So maybe, just maybe, it won't be as impossible as it typically is with a brand new big console launch to secure your own system if you were trying to get one day one. So we're going to break down all of this new info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick it off over at GameSpot, where they do have a write-up with exactly what has transpired in these last 24 hours with the tariff situation. So you have Switch 2 price remains in limbo as new tariffs reduced and paused, with one major exception. Tariffs are being lowered with a 90-day pause that takes us beyond the Switch 2 launch. In the wake of a crumbling global market, US President Donald Trump announced today that he is scaling back his original tariff plan, lowering tariffs significantly, basically everywhere except China. It remains to be seen what this means for the Switch 2, which was supposed to begin US pre-orders today. Trump said on Wednesday that the tariffs in most places will be lowered to 10%, and China is facing an increased 125% tariff rate. Both rate changes take effect immediately. Overall, Trump said he is initiating a 90-day pause to new tariff deals. 90 days from today is July 8th, 2025. Everyone wants to know what this means for Switch 2, and we don't know. According to FT or Financial Times, after the first Trump presidency, Nintendo shifted some manufacturing to Vietnam and Cambodia in response to Trump's position on trade with China. The report said that 50% of the Switch 2 production has come out of Vietnam and Cambodia in recent months. The tariff rate for these countries as of last week was 46% and 49% respectively, but now it's 10% effectively immediately. In theory, this would seemingly help Nintendo keep the Switch 2 price at $450 or close to it, but no one knows for sure, and Nintendo is yet to comment. The Switch 2 launches on June 5th, which is more than a month before the 90-day pause would end. Experts believe negotiations will take place between now and the deadline to solidify new trade agreements. So in my personal opinion, looking at the launch situation that Nintendo is in, and they still want to bring this console to market on June 5th, I do believe that that $450 price point and $500 price point for the bundle with Mario Kart World will actually be what we are able to pre-order. Probably in the upcoming days and weeks, we may get news about this. Now, there's some speculation online in terms of when the pre-orders will go live. Does Nintendo wait until after something like their Mario Kart World Direct, or do we get like a day or two advance notice and they're just going to go live very quickly within the next week or two? That is the kind of stuff you want to stay in the news cycle right now, at least with these Switch 2 updates, and I will definitely keep you informed here on this channel, because we may get long-term notice like a week out, or we may get less than that since Nintendo had to shift their original pre-order plans. I am hoping for 1 week advance notice so you can really prepare and maybe even ask that day off or the morning off at least, in case if you're typically very busy at work during the time that pre-orders would go live. because at the price point of $450 and $500, we are still going to be talking about a console that could potentially be very hard to secure. Although we have some good reports to back up what stock levels look like that we will get to in a moment. But this is not, an end-all be-all permanent fix for the Switch 2 pricing. And there is a reality where after this 90-day period with the 10% tariff, if a better trade negotiation cannot be agreed upon between the US, Vietnam, and Cambodia, the big producers for Switch 2 stock over here in the US region, there is a reality that Nintendo may have to look at this price point again later on. But it might be, if you're somebody who is going to wait to the holiday season to secure your Nintendo Switch 2, it might actually make more sense if we see Nintendo go ahead with the $450 and $500 price point to try to really get this console now, if you were going to get the console at all, because unfortunately it's just uncertainty. It may be nothing at the end of the day, but it also might not, because Nintendo will eat a certain percentage of their profits in tariffs if they have to. They will not eat too much of that. They are a for-profit company, and they will end up, pulling additional levers to potentially pass that cost on to us, the buyers, at the end of the day, if they don't get some kind of workable trade agreement from their manufacturing countries. And long term, maybe they diversify even further than they have so far, but right now in the immediate future, they can't really do that for the Switch 2 launch. So more to come on the pre-order dates once we learn them from Nintendo, and again, I will keep you guys informed on that. But now I want to shift the conversation to a couple good pieces of news as far as the headlines go, and read at least in terms of the Switch 2 stock levels that appear to be here in the US right now, and just some optimistic comments from Nintendo about them really actually trying to do what they've been saying in investors briefings this whole time, which is to combat scalping by essentially meeting the market demand or getting as close to that metric as they possibly can. And to share the first piece of information that backs this up, actually comes to us from Nintendeal over on X, where they do have a very large following of over 180,000 users. They are very well connected within the retail industry, stock drops, restocks, things like that. We even see them leak things in certain cases. In fact, they were another source besides Nate the Hate that was actually teasing the week of Donkey Kong for a potential Switch 2 reveal. Well, it ended up being on Donkey Kong Return HD release day. Anyway, you can see their post over, which reads, "Multiple sources have told me that the Switch 2 consoles will be extremely well stocked. More stock availability than any console launch in recent memory. However, accessories and games are expected to be much more limited." Now, we also have this next headline I want to take you through at Go Nintendo, where it says, "Nintendo confirms Switch 2 has been shipped to the US, and they really hope they can meet demand." NOA's president Doug Bowser spoke to CNBC and confirmed that Switch 2 units are already stocked up in the US, just waiting for launch day. As a matter of fact, Nintendo has been working hard to stockpile enough units for the platform's global launch. Doug Bowser said Nintendo has some time to build up inventories on a global basis, and that we really hope that we can meet demand at launch. Of course, we won't know if Nintendo did too much or not enough until June 5th, 2025 rolls around. In other words, you should have a good chance at snagging the system for launch, but none of us will feel 100% safe until we have our pre-order secured. So you may or may not remember, there was a prior report that we talked about suggesting that Nintendo back in January had already sent over, I believe it was 338,000 or around that number of completed, ready to go units here to the US. And that was as of January. Now, the shipping reports that you can go publicly verify that some people have premium accounts to do and look at customs data and stuff like that, those are months and months behind, so we only had January to go off of. But you would presume that Nintendo's not just going to stay at that 338,000 each month, but actually ramp up supply quite significantly over the upcoming months. But let's just say for fun, even if they kept it at the same bare minimum of 338,000, and January to June is about 6 months, we should expect just over 2 million units just for this US North American region, and that's a huge number, and likely it's a lot higher than that. So while there are estimations out there that Nintendo Switch 2 may sell 15 to 17 million units by the end of 2025, that's quite a long lead up to get to the end of 2025. And if Nintendo's maybe even ramping up production to higher volumes right now to make sure they get as many units here as they can before this 90-day pause on tariffs ends, we might actually be looking at a console launch that is not only a super high demand product, but one that is reasonably stocked at most retailers and not just impossible to find. So Again, we'll dive more into pre-order stuff, tips and tricks, and all of that. Once we get the pre-order date, we will have another full buyer's guide going live on this channel with things you want to do, whether you're trying to get one on an in-person walk-in pre-order like GameStop does, or some of the online retailers. Best Buy is doing a midnight launch from the sounds of things. I heard GameStop would also be doing a midnight launch, at least at select locations. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of info, and also what to do when pre-orders go live in a follow-up video. So make sure you're subscribed for that. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all this. Do you think there's a light at the end of the tunnel with this wild ride of Nintendo Switch 2? Good and bad news for the launch of this console. Do you think we're going to see Nintendo go ahead with the $450 and $500 price points that they previously communicated? And when do you personally expect pre-orders to launch yourself? I should mention that Nintendo's own My Nintendo Store website does still have May 8th as the date that they are going to start sending out pre-order invites. I have a direct link in my description down below. If you haven't done it yet, register your interest to buy from the My Nintendo Store, because that is a great backup option, and they do have a scalper mitigation method in place. Let's say you do have to be a paid NSO member, and some gameplay hour requirements have to be met, but that's still a great path. Do you think that retailers maybe have to wait that long as of May 8th, or do you think it's sometime between now and the April 17th Mario Kart World Direct? And are you somebody who's still planning on trying to get the console day one if you can, or are you going to wait a little bit longer and see how things shake out overall? But make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.